She invited him to D&D because she felt sorry for him. 13 years of friendship, and it took one board game to expose who he really was. This is the story of Kyle, and it doesn't end at the table. The original poster and her husband had fallen in love with D&D about 2 years before this story begins. They knew their siblings would love it too, so they started a home game with the husband as the DM. They invited the poster's brother and his girlfriend, the husband's sister, and one more person, Kyle. Kyle was someone the poster had known since they were both 14. Their parents were close friends, so Kyle became a fixture in her life whether she wanted him there or not. She described him as someone who was sort of a friend, but who also regularly drove her crazy. There were stretches where they got along great and stretches where she couldn't stand him. He was like family she was stuck with. Right around the time the group was forming, Kyle was going through a nasty divorce. He was trying to sell the house he'd bought with his wife. They hadn't even finalized the paperwork yet. The poster felt bad for him, so she invited him to join the game. This is one of those details that hits differently once you know how the story ends. She extended a hand because she felt sorry for him. That kindness is about to cost her more than she could have possibly imagined. Within about a month and a half, Kyle started flirting with the poster's sister-in-law, and the feelings were clearly mutual. By late October, while he was still trying to sell the house he'd shared with his wife, the sister-in-law was helping him move into his new apartment. By November she had a key. By January they were officially dating. Now the poster and her husband tried to keep the sister-in-law out of the Kyle situation from the very beginning. They didn't want to cause problems, but this detail matters later, because Kyle wasn't just joining a game, he was embedding himself into her husband's family. The D&D group, meanwhile, kept growing. What started as a small family game ballooned to a massive 9 players. They'd been working their way through Tomb of Annihilation for months, and they were finally approaching the end. During the tomb, Kyle got his hands on the Book of Vile Darkness. Now, for those who don't know, the Book of Vile Darkness is one of the most dangerous artifacts in all of D&D. It comes with serious drawbacks that affect the entire party. The worst of them, it makes all nearby potions completely useless. Kyle was both a massive rules lawyer and a terrible metagamer, and the book gave him exactly what he wanted, leverage. For a month and a half after getting it, every single time a party member tried to use a potion, Kyle would interrupt. "Where did you keep it? How close are you to me?" He wanted to make absolutely sure he didn't miss a single chance to nullify someone's potion. Every healing potion, every buff, every emergency save, Kyle was there to check if he could ruin it. A month and a half of this. 6 weeks of one player making the game worse for everyone else and enjoying every second of it. Let's be clear about what's happening here. Kyle has an item that hurts his own team, and instead of trying to minimize the damage, he is actively policing the table to make sure nobody gets around it. He's not playing a villain for story reasons. He's enjoying the control. After escaping the tomb, the party encountered a group of Yuan-Ti who wanted them to complete a side quest. They'd already found a crown the Yuan-Ti needed, and in exchange, the Yuan-Ti promised a reward and a feast. Simple enough. Immediately Kyle said he didn't want to go, no explanation, no reason, just a flat refusal. The party asked him why, he wouldn't say. They asked again. Nothing. A lot of the players had a habit of sitting back and waiting for something to happen, so the poster put it to a vote. The vote to go back for the reward won by a landslide, so they went. Kyle came along but said nothing. When they arrived, the Yuan-Ti led them into a room full of chests of gold. Then they asked for the crown. Kyle said, "I don't know where it is." 4 words, "I don't know where it is," and he just kept repeating them. The poster looked at him funny. "You had it," she said. "Where did it go?" "I don't know where it is." Someone asked if he'd lost it. "I don't know where it is." The Yuan-Ti threatened to kill the entire party. "I don't know where it is." The sister-in-law managed to talk the Yuan-Ti into letting them leave, but by that point it had been over an hour. Over an hour of Kyle first refusing to go, then refusing to explain what was going on. No reason, no context, nothing. The poster asked if she could punch his character. She played a monk after all. Kyle just walked away, and since the DM wasn't a fan of PvP, she couldn't follow through. Over an hour. 9 players sitting there while one person holds the entire session hostage because he decided unilaterally that the quest item was his personal property. This isn't a character decision. This is a power play. Finally, the characters all ended up outside. The poster asked Kyle one more time, "Where is the crown?" And Kyle finally answered. "I was the one who had it," he said. "I was the one who had to sacrifice to get it." To get the crown, he'd given up a copy of a book he had 2 of, one of which came from the poster herself. And based on that, he considered the crown his personal property. You were useless, he told her, so I don't have to tell you anything about what I decide to do with my own stuff. The poster saw red. She wanted to scream and cry, but she held it together. She quietly left the room while the others kept playing. Most of the group was connected online, but there were 2 other players in the room with her and the DM, her husband. They could see how upset she was, but the session continued for a little while longer. When they were wrapping up, the poster came back and told the sister-in-law that she wanted to divide up the group's shared adventurers fund. They clearly weren't working together anymore, so there was no reason to share resources. The sister-in-law later texted the poster to make excuses for Kyle. He really didn't know where the crown was, she said, because without telling anyone, not the party, not even the DM, Kyle had decided the crown was too evil and cast a spell to make it undetectable for the next 1,000 years. Let's walk through what actually happened. Kyle took a quest item that belonged to the group, unilaterally decided to destroy it without telling anyone, then refused to explain himself for over an hour while the entire session ground to a halt, then told the poster she was useless and didn't deserve an explanation. And the sister-in-law's defense was that he really didn't know where it was, because he'd made it so nobody could ever find it again. Not only is declaring a quest item your own property a massive violation of the social contract at the table, but getting rid of it and then stonewalling for an hour is something else entirely. That's not playing a character. That's punishing everyone else for not agreeing with you. Part 2. Now some context on the DM. The poster's husband was still relatively new to running games, and with 9 players, he had a tendency to get overwhelmed. During the crown incident, several things were happening simultaneously. Another player was being mildly uncooperative, someone else was trying to steal some of the gold, and there was at least one other situation the DM was juggling. He wasn't fully aware of how long the conflict had stretched on or how difficult Kyle was being. Kyle had sent the DM a text with the name of the spell he'd used on the crown, but with no explanation attached. Just the spell name, nothing else, and the DM missed it in the chaos. The spell was also one Kyle would have just gained from a recent level up, and casting it would have been extremely noticeable to the rest of the party. But the DM didn't catch any of it. To his credit, the husband acknowledged that he'd dropped the ball. Since then, the group had been working on only having one thing happen at a time to help him manage, and he'd been actively improving his DM skills. This is honestly understandable. 9 players is a lot for an experienced DM, let alone a new one, but it also means Kyle got away with something he probably shouldn't have. If the DM had been paying closer attention, he would have caught the spell being cast and the whole thing could have been handled differently. Instead, Kyle exploited the chaos. At first, the poster's husband didn't fully understand why she was so angry. He asked Kyle to come over the next day to talk things out face to face. Kyle refused. So the poster sent Kyle a text. She explained why she was upset, acknowledged that he'd been speaking in character, but told him she thought he'd gone too far. She was doing exactly what he'd later accuse her of not doing. She was communicating directly, calmly, like an adult. Kyle's response put everything into context. First, Kyle told her she shouldn't be upset because it's just a game, classic minimization. Then he pivoted and listed a bunch of reasons why he should be upset with her, turned the whole thing around, and finally he wrapped it all up by accusing her of messing up his relationships and telling her that next time she should act like an adult and just talk to him, the thing she was literally doing right now, in this exact text conversation. Read that again. She texted him to talk things out. He responded by telling her she should have just talked to him. That's not a miscommunication, that's a technique. Deny what happened, attack the person confronting you, and reverse who the victim is. It's called DARVO, and it's one of the most common tactics used by manipulative people. But Kyle's text did something he didn't intend. It triggered a memory. The poster had overheard one of Kyle's last arguments with his ex-wife when she was helping him clean up his house to sell, and he had argued with his ex-wife in the exact same way. First dismissal, you shouldn't feel that way, then redirection, here's a list of things you've done wrong, then the final twist, you're the one causing problems, not me. And suddenly, 13 years of frustration snapped into focus. Every time Kyle had made her angry and she couldn't explain why. Every time she'd walked away from a conversation feeling like she was the crazy one. Every time she'd been confused by his behavior but chalked it up to just Kyle being Kyle. It all made sense now. This is the moment the story stops being about D&D 13 years. She knew something was off the entire time, but she could never pin it down. It's like finding a manual for a machine that's been breaking your things for over a decade and suddenly realizing it was designed to do that. The poster told Kyle she wasn't going to let him talk to her like that anymore. In response, Kyle took a text that the poster's husband had sent him, cropped it so it looked like the husband agreed with Kyle, and sent it to the poster. When the poster sat down with her husband and showed him the messages, they compared everything, the full texts, the cropped versions, and they realized Kyle wasn't just arguing, he was actively trying to pit them against each other. Kyle's last text to the husband said he was going to take a break from D&D until the poster figured herself out. Cropping a text message to manipulate your friend's marriage. Let that sink in. He didn't just twist words in conversation. He fabricated evidence. He took a real message and surgically removed the parts that didn't support his narrative, then weaponized it. That's not impulsive. That's calculated. The poster met Kyle at a Starbucks and told him he was no longer welcome to play with them, and that while she recognized he was probably going to be family, she wasn't willing to be his friend anymore. She told him this had been a pattern in their lives and she was done. She described this conversation as the hardest thing she had ever done in her entire life, partly because of their history. They'd known each other since they were kids. Their parents were close. There were genuine stretches of real friendship over those 13 years. Walking away from all of that is not easy, no matter how toxic the person is. And partly because even as she was sitting there telling him she wouldn't be manipulated anymore, he was trying to manipulate her. He told her she was wrong, that he didn't say what she thought he said, that she was misremembering things. Even at the end, he couldn't help himself. She went home crying. Even in the exit conversation, he can't stop. She's sitting there ending a 13-year relationship, and his instinct is to gaslight her one more time, to tell her that her own memories are wrong. That takes a special kind of person. Part 3. And then it got worse. The poster's father-in-law called her husband and told him not to stand up for her, not to express his support for her. This is her husband's own father telling him to abandon his wife in a conflict with his sister's boyfriend. Kyle and the sister-in-law got engaged just before Christmas. Remember, this whole story started because he was going through a divorce. Not even a year later, he's engaged to the sister of the woman he just manipulated. And while the poster says she was glad her sister-in-law was happy, she was terrified for her. She'd seen exactly how Kyle treats the people closest to him. The poster and her husband tried to keep the sister-in-law out of the conflict. They deliberately didn't badmouth Kyle to her. They tried to separate the friendship issue from the family relationship, but Kyle dragged her in anyway. And at one point, the sister-in-law repeated an argument to the poster's husband, word for word, that Kyle used to use against his ex-wife. Kyle is a very logical person, she said, and the poster is very emotional. So Kyle can't see the emotional side, and she can't see the logical one. She is now parroting his script. The exact same framework he used to dismiss his ex-wife's feelings, he's taught to his new partner, and she's using it to defend him against the very person trying to warn her. This is textbook isolation behavior. Rewrite reality for your partner until they argue your case for you. For the next year and a half, the poster's husband's family treated her terribly. By Christmas, just a month after the D&D incident, they had already gone low contact. The family constantly accused the poster of gossiping, even though she wasn't. They were the ones gossiping. She was told that she was a regular topic of conversation at family dinners whenever Kyle and the sister-in-law were present. When the husband's parents eventually stopped being snippy and actually asked some questions, they discovered that Kyle had told quite a few lies and exaggerated a lot of things. Removing him from the group's Facebook planning chat became, in Kyle's version, making a giant public declaration that he was no longer welcome. He told the in-laws that the poster had cut him off from all his friends, but the truth was, she had barely said anything to the other players. She'd actually told them all directly that who they're friends with is their choice, and it was none of her business. Kyle never once reached out to any of them, not even one he'd been friends with for years. But because Kyle was constantly complaining to the husband's parents, and the poster was staying quiet and refusing to gossip, the family chose to believe Kyle. This is one of the cruelest ironies in manipulation. The person who stays quiet, who tries to take the high road, who refuses to drag others into the drama, ends up looking guilty. Meanwhile, the person actively spreading lies and playing victim gets believed because at least he's talking. Silence doesn't mean innocence to most people. It means you have something to hide. Kyle and the sister-in-law got married in June of the following year. The poster wasn't invited. Well, technically she was told she could come if she apologized to Kyle for hurting his feelings. She refused because she believed she hadn't done anything wrong. She had told him the truth as kindly as she could, and to apologize would be the same as admitting she was wrong to stop him from bullying her. In May, just before the wedding, the poster's mother-in-law cornered her in a room under the pretense of celebrating the husband's birthday. She tried to pressure the poster into apologizing. When the poster refused again, the mother-in-law told her she was destroying their entire family. Let's be absolutely clear about who destroyed what. Kyle manipulated the poster for 13 years, lied to his in-laws for months, cropped text messages to sabotage her marriage, and turned a D&D argument into a family war. But the poster is destroying the family, because she won't apologize for telling the truth. The math doesn't add up, but it never does with people like Kyle. 3 weeks before the wedding, something remarkable happened. Remember, the poster's parents and Kyle's parents were old friends. That's how Kyle ended up in her life in the first place. Well, the poster's father and Kyle's father went out for lunch, and during that lunch, they discovered something that changed everything. Kyle and the sister-in-law had been lying to Kyle's own parents for months. They had told them that the poster had been invited to the wedding, but refused to come because she was angry at her own in-laws. That was a complete fabrication. She wasn't invited at all unless she apologized to Kyle. He was lying to everyone, not just the poster, not just the in-laws, his own parents. He built a completely different version of reality for every audience and none of them matched. That's not someone who lost his temper over a D&D game. That's someone who has been doing this his whole life. After discovering the lies to Kyle's own parents, the poster and her husband went no contact with Kyle and the sister-in-law entirely. They tried to maintain low contact with the husband's parents over the summer, but when the poster's birthday came around in the fall, she started having awful nightmares. She would dream about the in-laws cornering her and saying terrible things to her face. She became extremely depressed. By October, they cut off all contact with the husband's parents as well. They tried to keep a relationship with the husband's younger brothers, but they knew those brothers had been hearing the family's version of events for months. Everything filtered through Kyle's narrative, repeated by parents and sister. The brothers grew distant, and eventually that relationship faded too. Nightmares, depression, isolation from people she once considered family, all because she invited someone to play D&D with her because she felt sorry for him during his divorce. The same divorce that should have been the first sign of who he really was. Even months after going no contact, the drama didn't stop. The poster mentioned that on the very day she wrote her update, the father-in-law had sent a group text to all his children about picking up their belongings from the house. And at the end of the message, he added a jab. He said he didn't know if they still had him blocked, so they might not even get the message. They never blocked him, not once. They just stopped responding. But the family kept airing grievances about the poster to everyone while spending months accusing her of doing the exact same thing. The same behavior they condemned in her, they practiced openly and without a hint of self-awareness. The accusation was always the confession. They accused her of gossiping while they gossiped. They accused her of creating drama while they created drama. They accused her of cutting people off while they pushed her out. When someone repeatedly accuses you of the thing they're doing, pay attention. They're telling you exactly who they are. Outro. But there is one bright spot in all of this. The D&D group kept playing. Without Kyle, without the 9-player chaos, without the drama, they continued. They moved on to Curse of Strahd with a much smaller, tighter group. And by all accounts, they've been having a wonderful time. The game that started this whole disaster survived it. She summed it all up in one sentence. A problem player decided not to cooperate in or out of game, tried to tell her she had no right to be upset, made her realize she'd spent 13 years letting him manipulate and abuse her, and seriously messed up her relationship with her husband's entire family. All because she felt sorry for him and let him play D&D with them. The poster lost a family, but she kept the game, and sometimes that's the best ending you're going to get. If you want to see more stories like this, check out the playlist in the description. And if you've ever dealt with someone like Kyle, I'm sorry, but I'm glad you got out.